Could you survive as a Helldiver, where the average life expectancy after deployment is just 2 minutes? That's not an exaggeration. It's statistically baked into the system. You're dropped into a hostile alien territory, often at supersonic speeds, with enemies that outnumber and outclass you, and no real safety net if things go wrong. Friendly fire? Always a risk. Victory bonuses? Non-existent. It's not about glory. It's about surviving long enough to finish the mission and get extracted if you're lucky. Helldivers face 3 alien factions, each with their own terrifying advantages: the Bugs, the Automatons, and the Illuminate. These aren't your typical space invaders. They're existential threats designed to push humanity to its breaking point. Let's break down what makes each of them so lethal. First, the Terminids, nicknamed Bugs, but calling them that is like calling a hurricane windy. They're a hyper-evolving, hive-minded species with reproduction rates that put even Earth's locust plagues to shame. Locusts, for reference, can reproduce fast enough to increase population density from 60 to 150 million per square kilometer in days. Now imagine that, but with armor plating, acidic bile, and the ability to tear through titanium. Their genetic manipulation via element 710 farming has accelerated their evolution unnaturally. Some morph in real time, like bile titans that spray corrosive acid with a pH level likely below 1, strong enough to dissolve metal and flesh in seconds. And then there are chargers, who resemble 4-ton biotanks capable of smashing reinforced bunkers. That kind of impact would register over 20,000 newtons of force, equivalent to being hit by a speeding SUV. These creatures don't swarm, they adapt. They're a biological tsunami, rewriting Darwin's rulebook with every engagement. Then come the automatons. These mechanical nightmares are the ideological descendants of the cyborg secessionists from Cyberstan, but they've gone full synthetic. Think of them as walking algorithms of destruction. Troopers pack kinetic weapons that can punch through ballistic armor. Devastators function like autonomous artillery platforms, and their tanks operate with shielding systems likely comparable to reactive military plating on modern MBTs. What makes them terrifying isn't just their firepower, it's that they don't hesitate, they don't get tired, and they never retreat. Their drop pods deploy with precision and efficiency, suggesting orbital targeting accuracy within meters. They operate more like a neutral net than an army, adaptive, decentralized, and constantly learning. And finally, the Illuminate. These aren't aliens with guns. They're manipulators of space-time, wielding warp technology that appears to collapse and re-expand local space-time to phase in and out of combat zones. In real physics, manipulating space-time would require exotic matter with negative mass, something we haven't proven exists, but it's theorized in the Alcubierre warp drives. Illuminate weapons are energy-based, bypassing conventional shielding by tuning to frequencies that likely destabilize matter at a molecular level. Worse, they convert captured citizens into voteless, biologically intact, mentally overwritten. That's psychological warfare taken to the extreme, blending cognitive manipulation and battlefield tactics. In short, they don't just fight you, they reprogram you. So, you're not just fighting aliens, you're battling evolution, computation, and quantum manipulation all at once. Helldivers are sent into combat with gear that's just as deadly to the enemy as it is to themselves. But if we stripped away the sci-fi setting and dropped this arsenal into a real-world battlefield, how well would it hold up? The answer is complicated. Let's start with the firearms. The AR-23 Liberator is the standard assault rifle, a dependable, no-frills weapon chambered in what seems like a 7.62mm equivalent. In real-world ballistics, A 7.62 by 51 millimeter NATO round can travel at 2,800 feet per second and deliver over 3,000 joules of kinetic energy. That's enough to penetrate most soft body armor and even some level 3 plates at close range. Against lightly armored bugs or Illuminate infantry, this would be extremely effective in burst engagements. But here's the catch: volume. A swarm of 200 charging Terminids isn't going to care that your bullets are technically lethal. That's why Helldivers carry high-capacity mags and rely on full auto fire. Problem is, sustained full auto in real life causes rapid barrel heating, weapon fouling, and reduced accuracy. Without a dedicated cooling system or regular cleaning, a real AR-23 would jam or overheat in minutes. It's fine for short engagements, but prolonged battles would push it beyond its mechanical limits. Now the LAS-98 laser cannon. This is where things get spicy. Unlike traditional firearms, it fires concentrated beams of light, likely in the infrared or ultraviolet range, capable of vaporizing targets through thermal conduction. To do that in real life, you'd need a laser output in the megawatt range. For reference, the US Navy's Helios system is a 60 kilowatt laser, and it can disable drones or melt through metal over time. To make the LAS-98 battlefield viable, you'd need about 10 to 100 times that power. That means a portable power source equivalent to a small nuclear reactor. In short, real-world lasers are already a thing, but not handheld. If miniaturized, the LAS-98 would absolutely destroy bugs, sear through automaton circuits, and bypass traditional shields by focusing energy on a pinpoint. But overheating remains an issue. Without effective thermal dispersion, like a liquid nitrogen coolant loop or graphene heat sink, you're going to end up cooking yourself as much as the enemy. The P19 Redeemer, for example, is a high rate of fire pistol that probably fires caseless ammunition or electromagnetic slugs. Caseless rounds reduce weight and jam risk, but suffer from overheating and cook-off hazards, where the heat ignites ammo still in the chamber. Electromagnetic or coil guns are real in lab settings, using magnetic fields to accelerate projectiles. They're compact, silent, and deadly, if you've got enough juice. In a world with portable fusion packs, sure. In today's world, you'll get one shot every few seconds. Great if your target isn't a 10-foot murder bug charging at 30 miles per hour. Then there's grenades. Standard frags create a pressure wave and shrapnel burst. In real combat, a frag grenade has a radius of 5 meters and a casualty radius of 15. Against unarmored enemies, like base-level bugs, that's lethal. But against armored cyborgs, or the outer carapace of a bile titan, not so much. You need thermobaric explosives, fuel-air devices that generate a secondary pressure wave to disrupt internal systems or breach the outer shell. And against the Illuminate, probably useless. They'd warp out before the fuse even ignites. Incendiary grenades are a different beast. Thermite or magnesium-based ones burn at over 2,200 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt steel, ignite flesh, and create an area denial zone. Against bugs, brutal. Against automatons, potentially effective. Molten metal could destroy sensors or compromise servos, but Illuminate units often float or phase shift, meaning they may not even occupy the same physical plane consistently. And then you have heavy ordnance, like the MG43 machine gun or the recoilless rifle. These are Helldivers' answer to enemy armor. The MG43 lays down suppressive fire at over 1,000 rounds per minute, probably using tungsten cord or armor-piercing rounds. That's enough kinetic energy to penetrate 1 to 2 inches of hardened steel, or about the thickness of a World War II tank's armor. Against basic automatons, this would rip through plating like paper, but larger variants, like Hulks or tanks, would require explosive anti-armor rounds or even shaped charges to disable. That's where the recoilless rifle shines. It likely functions like a Carl Gustav or AT-4, using backblast venting to reduce recoil. These kinds of weapons can deliver up to 3,000 psi of pressure upon impact and destroy bunkers or lightly armored vehicles. In real-world conditions, a recoilless rifle would absolutely ruin a Bile Titan's day, assuming you hit the right spot. Now let's dig into stratagems. These aren't weapons, they're force multipliers. Calling it a turret is like summoning a robotic sentry gun. But these things aren't just stationary. They track movement, respond to threats, and use lethal force regardless of who's in the way. That's not far from existing automated sentry systems like South Korea's Super Aegis 2, which can detect targets at 3 kilometers and eliminate them within seconds. The problem? No IFF. In Helldivers, if you're between a turret and a target, you become the target. That's not just game mechanics, that's a terrifyingly plausible battlefield risk. Mechs are another stratagem. They function like bipedal tanks with miniguns and rockets, and while real-world military R&D is slowly catching up, Boston Dynamics, DARPA, etc., we're still decades away from anything with the power-to-weight ratio and balance needed for battlefield use. That said, if built with today's titanium carbon composites and powered by fusion packs, these walkers could rival tanks in firepower and infantry in maneuverability. Against bugs, devastating. Against automatons, probably matched. Against Illuminate, well, if they can phase into your cockpit, it's game over. And now, the Hell Pod. It's not a weapon, but it might as well be. Descending from orbit at Mach 5+, the kinetic energy alone turns the pod into a meteor. If we use the formula E equals 1/2 mv squared and assume a 2,000 kilogram pod, we're talking about 50 million joules of impact energy. That's equivalent to a small bunker buster. You land on anything, it's obliterated. But surviving inside? That requires shock-absorbing foam, inertial dampeners, or magnetic deceleration. Otherwise, your organs would likely liquefy before you even hit the ground. Last, the crown jewel, orbital bombardments. These are called in via stratagem and deliver explosive payloads from orbit, likely using tungsten rods or kinetic strike weapons. This isn't far from the rods from God concept. Hypervelocity projectiles drop from orbit to deliver explosive energy without explosives. A single tungsten rod dropped from space could hit with the force of a small nuclear bomb, without the radiation. Against automatons and bugs? Overkill. Against Illuminate? Only if you time it right. But again, the biggest threat isn't the aliens, it's you. Every single stratagem, every piece of gear has the potential to wipe out your squad. It's not just about what you use, but when, where, and how. The weapons work, but only if you think like a tactician, not a trigger-happy grunt. So, how effective would this gear be in our world? Honestly, in a real war against evolving aliens, space-time manipulators, or AI-controlled tanks, you'd need every last bullet, beam, and blast. You'd still be outmatched. The science behind the Helldivers arsenal is grounded in real theory, some of it in practice, but even the most advanced loadout is just a tool. The difference between a massacre and a mission success, that's all on you. Helldivers are recruited young, 18.7 years old on average, and subjected to brutal training. Picture being dropped into a boot camp where failure isn't just punished, it's fatal. Their physical regimen involves anaerobic endurance, exosuit handling, and zero-gravity combat drills. The average armor loadout weighs about 70 to 90 pounds, not counting weapons or stratagems. Imagine running full sprint in that gear while under fire from energy weapons, acid splash, and explosive projectiles. A 2017 US Army study found that carrying over 60 pounds reduces a soldier's sprint performance by 30% and shooting accuracy by 20%. Now throw in alien terrain, hostile atmospheres, and nightmarish enemies, and you've got a recipe for physical collapse. But it's the mental cost that's worse. The average life expectancy, again, 2 minutes, means Helldivers are psychologically conditioned to expect death. Imagine launching into a battle knowing you'll likely die before your next cup of coffee. PTSD, anxiety, and desensitization aren't rare. They're default settings. Helldivers experience what's known in psychology as moral injury, damage done not by what happens to them, but what they force to witness or do. Watching a friend get liquefied by acid or vaporized by your own airstrike leaves scars no debriefing can erase. Add to that Super Earth's propaganda. Sacrifice is glorified, dissent is discouraged, and Helldivers are constantly reminded that they're disposable. The system treats them less like people and more like renewable ammunition. The long-term result: burnout, detachment, and in some cases, outright breakdowns mid-mission. This isn't just science fiction. It's rooted in real military psychology. Studies on combat veterans show that constant exposure to life-threatening situations with no sense of control increases cortisol levels, impairs decision-making, and accelerates aging. In Helldivers, that kind of stress is a daily routine. Let's talk logistics. Super Earth's entire civilization revolves around perpetual war. That requires a supply chain of staggering proportions. First, the super destroyers, massive orbiting carriers that serve as both mobile bases and factories. They likely generate over 100 megawatts of power per day, judging by the scale of operations. That's about what it takes to power a small city. Just fueling these behemoths would require near-constant mining of fusion-grade materials or tapping Element 710 cores. Element 710 is the crown jewel. It powers weapons, drives evolution in the bugs, and keeps stratagem deployment active. If it were real, it might resemble a high-yield fissile or antimatter-like compound. And antimatter, for context, costs around $62.5 trillion per gram to produce and store safely using today's tech. Stratagems, according to lore, cost as much as a citizen's yearly income. If we assume that's roughly $50,000 per person, every mission that uses airstrikes, mechs, and resupplies racks up a bill in the millions for each Helldiver mission, most of which end in failure. Recruitment is another constant pressure. Super Earth operates under a managed democracy, meaning the illusion of choice is maintained while control stays centralized. Through propaganda, education, and cultural conditioning, citizens are molded to believe that service equals purpose. It's Brave New World meets Starship Troopers. But here's the issue. Every system has its limits. You can only replace losses so fast. You can only fund so many weapons, drop pods, and orbital cannons before the system begins to buckle. And when morale runs dry, when citizens stop volunteering, the machinery grinds to a halt. So the real enemy? It's not the bugs, automatons, or Illuminate. It's entropy, the slow, inevitable collapse of a society that runs on blood, steel, and denial. Helldivers isn't just a game about aliens and guns. It's a brutal thought experiment about sacrifice, control, and survival in a society built for war. With a 2-minute life expectancy, high-tech gear that kills as easily as it saves, and enemies that push the limits of biology and physics, the battlefield is only half the story. If you were thrown in that drop pod, which stratagem would you bring? Would you risk the laser cannon or play it safe with a resupply? Drop your strategy in the comments. And if you've ever accidentally wiped your whole squad with an airstrike, you're not alone. This is more than just space warfare. This is the science of surviving the impossible. Stay alert, stay alive, and don't stand where the Hell Pod lands.